Hello, my students. Before China was skyscrapers, technology, and global power, before modern borders and modern systems, China was already ancient. While other civilizations rose and disappeared, China learned something different: how to change without breaking, how to fall without forgetting, and how to continue when others ended. This is not just a story of emperors and dynasties. It is a story of memory, of patience, of a civilization that understood time not as a straight line, but as a long river that never truly stops flowing. So stay with me until the very end, because to understand China, you must understand continuity, why dynasties came and went, why order mattered more than speed, and why even today, thousands of years later, the past still quietly guides the future. Let's begin this journey through time together. Part 1. China's story does not begin with a single ruler, a single city, or a single moment. It begins with continuity, with rivers flowing long before names were given, with land cultivated across generations, and with a civilization that learned very early how to survive time itself. While many civilizations rose and disappeared, China learned something different: how to change without breaking. The earliest Chinese societies formed around the Yellow River and the Yangtze, places where agriculture demanded cooperation, patience, and order. Survival depended on rhythm: planting, harvesting, waiting. From the very beginning, life taught an important lesson: stability matters. This mindset shaped everything that followed. China did not build its identity on conquest alone, but on balance, structure, and continuity. As early dynasties emerged, power was not seen only as force, but as responsibility. Rulers were expected to maintain harmony between heaven, earth, and people. This idea became central to Chinese civilization. Authority was not absolute by nature. It had to be justified. If a dynasty ruled well, it deserved loyalty. If it ruled poorly, it lost legitimacy. This belief created a cycle that repeated across centuries: rise, prosperity, corruption, decline, and renewal. This cycle did not weaken China, it strengthened it. Dynasties changed, but civilization remained. Languages evolved, borders shifted, capitals moved, yet the idea of China continued. This sense of continuity is rare in human history. It created deep respect for history, ancestors, and tradition. The past was not something to escape. It was something to learn from. Writing played a crucial role in this continuity. While spoken language changed, written characters remained remarkably stable. This allowed knowledge to pass across centuries. Poems, philosophies, laws, and stories survived long after dynasties fell. Education became a path to power, not just birth or force. Scholars mattered, learning mattered, memory mattered. Philosophy shaped China as deeply as politics. Confucian thought emphasized order, respect, family, duty, and moral leadership. It taught that society functions best when everyone understands their role and acts responsibly. This philosophy did not promise freedom in the modern sense, but stability. In times of chaos, stability was survival. At the same time, other philosophies offered balance. Taoism taught harmony with nature and acceptance of change. Buddhism later brought ideas of suffering, impermanence, and compassion. These belief systems did not cancel each other. They coexisted. Chinese identity became layered, not exclusive. People did not choose one truth and reject others. They lived between them. As dynasties expanded, China developed advanced systems of governance. Bureaucracy replaced pure aristocracy. Officials were selected through examinations rather than bloodline. This created a state that could outlast individual rulers. Even when emperors failed, institutions survived. This was another secret of continuity. China also understood borders differently. It did not always seek endless expansion. It focused on stability within its world. Walls were built not only to keep others out, but to protect order inside. Foreign influence was sometimes welcomed, sometimes resisted, but rarely allowed to redefine the core identity. Yet China was never isolated. Trade routes connected it to Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Goods, ideas, and technologies traveled both ways. Silk, paper, printing, and gunpowder changed the world. China influenced others without always realizing it. Its power was often quiet, practical, and enduring. Conflict existed, of course. Wars were fought. Dynasties collapsed violently. Invasions occurred. But even conquest did not erase continuity. Foreign rulers often adopted Chinese systems rather than destroying them. They ruled China by becoming part of it. This is one of the most remarkable patterns in history. China absorbed conquerors more often than it was absorbed. Family remained the core of society. Loyalty to family came before loyalty to state. This created strong social bonds and deep responsibility across generations. Individual desire was often secondary to collective stability. This value shaped behavior, expectation, and identity. Over time, this focus on continuity created both strength and tension. Stability reduced chaos, but it could also resist innovation. Respect for tradition preserved wisdom, but sometimes delayed change. China lived with this balance, progress within structure, adaptation without collapse. By the time later dynasties emerged, China was already ancient. It had seen cycles repeat many times. It knew that nothing lasts forever. Not power, not wealth, not rulers. But it also knew something else. Civilization can endure if it learns how to bend. And this is the key to China's story. China is not defined by one dynasty, one emperor, or one era. It is defined by survival across time, by memory stronger than collapse, by continuity stronger than disruption. This is only the beginning, because in the next part, we will explore how China reached moments of great strength and great challenge, how order created prosperity, how stagnation invited pressure, and how the cycle of dynasties continued shaping the Chinese world. Part 2. As centuries passed, China entered periods of extraordinary strength, moments when order, culture, and prosperity aligned so well that the world beyond its borders felt distant and secondary. Powerful dynasties rose not only because they conquered, but because they organized life with precision. Agriculture expanded, cities grew, canals connected regions, and population increased. Stability created confidence, and confidence shaped identity. China began to see itself not just as a country, but as a world in itself. During these eras, the state refined its systems. The bureaucracy became more sophisticated, and merit-based examinations deepened the role of scholars. Knowledge was not merely admired, it was institutionalized. A person could rise through study, discipline, and moral reputation. This created a powerful belief that order comes from education, not chaos. Society was arranged like a long chain of responsibility, stretching from the emperor to the village family. The emperor stood at the center, but not as a god. He was seen as a mediator between heaven and earth. His role was to maintain harmony. When floods, famine, or rebellion occurred, people did not only blame nature or enemies, they questioned leadership. Was the ruler still worthy? Had the mandate of heaven been lost? This idea created an unusual balance. Authority was immense, but never eternal. Power had conditions. Culturally, these strong dynastic periods allowed creativity to flourish. Poetry, painting, calligraphy, architecture, and philosophy reached remarkable heights. Art was not only decoration, it was moral expression. A good painting reflected inner balance. A good poem revealed harmony between emotion and restraint. Beauty was connected to order, not excess. China's relationship with the outside world during these times was confident but cautious. Trade expanded, especially along long routes connecting Asia to distant lands. Merchants traveled, ideas circulated, and foreign goods entered China. Yet China did not rush to imitate others. It absorbed what fit and ignored what did not. Cultural confidence reduced the need for domination. Influence flowed quietly. But prosperity carries risk. Over time, stability hardened into rigidity. Systems that once ensured order began resisting change. The bureaucracy became heavy. Corruption grew slowly, often unnoticed at first. Officials protected position more than purpose. Innovation slowed. While society remained stable, it also became vulnerable. History repeated its lesson again. What creates strength can later create weakness. External pressure increased. Nomadic groups along the borders tested China's defenses. Some were resisted. Others eventually conquered parts of the land. Yet even in conquest, the pattern held. New rulers often adopted Chinese administration, language, and culture. The system survived even when the throne changed hands. China did not disappear under invasion. It transformed invaders into participants. This ability to absorb outsiders is central to continuity. Identity was not defined by ethnicity alone, but by participation in civilization. To rule China, one had to rule as China. This is why continuity outlasted bloodlines. Still, cycles of decline were painful. Rebellions erupted when peasants suffered under heavy taxes or neglect. Famines exposed failure. Trust eroded. Once legitimacy collapsed, collapse followed quickly. Dynasties that seemed eternal vanished in decades. Chaos returned. Lives were lost. Order broke down. And yet, after chaos, reconstruction followed. New leaders emerged promising renewal, justice, and harmony. They restored order by appealing to familiar values. Family, duty, stability, and moral governance returned. The cycle restarted, not because China was trapped, but because this rhythm had proven survival. One of the most defining aspects of this cycle was memory. China did not forget its past dynasties. History was recorded meticulously. Failures were studied. Successes were admired. This historical awareness created humility and patience. People understood that decline was not final. Renewal was possible. But the world beyond China was changing faster. While China relied on continuity, other regions began experimenting aggressively. Technology, trade, and military power transformed global balance. What had once been distance now became proximity. Pressure would soon come not from traditional rivals, but from an unfamiliar force, a world driven by expansion, industry, and speed. And this pressure would challenge China's deepest instinct: stability. In the next part, we will explore how China faced internal strain and external shock, how continuity was tested by modern forces, and how a civilization built on cycles struggled with a world that no longer waited. Part 3. As the world beyond China began moving faster, China remained anchored in its long rhythm. For centuries, this rhythm had protected the civilization, allowing it to recover from collapse and renew itself again and again. But this time, the challenge was different. It did not arrive slowly through familiar rivals or internal rebellion alone. It arrived suddenly, powered by technology, industry, and a global system that rewarded speed over balance. Internal pressure was already building. Population growth strained land and resources. Corruption weakened trust between rulers and people. Bureaucratic systems that once ensured order now struggled to respond quickly. Reform was discussed, but often delayed. Stability had become so valued that disruption felt dangerous, even when change was necessary. At the same time, foreign powers approached China not as students or distant traders, but as competitors and controllers. They demanded access, influence, and submission to new rules of global trade. China, long accustomed to setting its own terms, found itself pressured in ways it had never experienced before. The old world view, that China was the center and others were peripheral, began to fracture. This moment was deeply destabilizing, not only politically, but psychologically. For the first time in centuries, continuity did not guarantee security. Conflicts erupted that exposed this vulnerability. Defeats shocked the population and leadership alike. Systems that had worked for generations suddenly failed against new weapons, new strategies, and new economic models. The realization was painful. Moral order alone could not protect against industrial power. China faced a dilemma that cut to the heart of its identity. How do you modernize without losing yourself? How do you adopt new systems without abandoning continuity? How do you move fast without breaking what holds you together? Responses varied. Some argued for radical reform. Others defended tradition fiercely. Many feared that change would erase everything that made China China. This fear was not irrational. History had taught that chaos destroys lives. And so, hesitation dominated decision-making. As pressure intensified, unrest spread. Peasants suffered. Intellectuals questioned authority. Reformers pushed against rigid systems. Rebellions erupted, fueled by frustration and despair. The old dynastic cycle, decline followed by renewal, began repeating, but under conditions far more dangerous than before. Eventually, the imperial system itself collapsed. The end of the last dynasty marked a historic rupture. For the first time in thousands of years, China no longer had an emperor. This was not just a political change, it was a civilizational shock. A structure that had defined order, legitimacy, and continuity was gone. What followed was uncertainty. China struggled to define a new form of unity. Competing visions clashed. Warlords, reformers, revolutionaries, and foreign interests pulled the country in different directions. Stability disappeared. The familiar rhythm of renewal failed to restore balance quickly. The old cycle was breaking, yet even in this chaos, continuity did not vanish. Cultural values persisted. Family bonds remained strong. Respect for history endured. People continued organizing life around community, responsibility, and memory. Even when political systems collapsed, social fabric held. This period reveals something crucial about Chinese continuity. It was never dependent on a single ruler or system. It lived in habits, values, and collective memory. Dynasties could fall, but civilization endured. The search for a new path intensified. Some looked outward, studying foreign systems. Others looked inward, rediscovering ancient philosophy. Many attempted to combine both. China did not abandon continuity, it began reshaping it. But reshaping came at enormous cost. Wars, invasions, and internal conflicts followed. Suffering reached levels that tested endurance. Entire generations were shaped by instability. And yet, through all of this, the idea of China did not disappear. It adapted again, not through slow cycles this time, but through survival under pressure. This period taught a new lesson. Continuity alone was no longer enough. Survival now required transformation, and that transformation would redefine China forever. In the next part, we'll explore how China rebuilt itself after collapse, how revolution reshaped continuity, and how a civilization thousands of years old entered a radically new chapter while carrying its past within it. Part 4. When China began rebuilding itself after collapse, it was no longer returning to a familiar cycle. This time, the world had changed too much, and the old rhythms could not simply restart. Continuity had to be redefined. What followed was one of the most intense periods of transformation in Chinese history. A time when the past was questioned, rejected, reused, and reinterpreted all at once. Revolution promised clarity where chaos reigned. It promised unity where fragmentation had spread. And above all, it promised dignity after a long period of humiliation. For many Chinese people, this was not just about politics. It was about restoring meaning, about proving that China could stand again on its own terms in a world that had once treated it as weak. The new order that emerged did not erase China's deep instincts. It reorganized them. Authority returned to the center, but in a new form. Collective purpose replaced imperial hierarchy. The language changed, but the structure felt familiar. Discipline, order, and unity were emphasized once again. Stability was still the goal. Only the path toward it had shifted. This transformation came with enormous cost. Campaigns meant to reshape society moved quickly and forcefully. Old traditions were criticized, hierarchies were overturned, intellectual life was reshaped, families were tested, pain was widespread. Continuity was not broken, but it was strained, stretched, and sometimes violently challenged. And yet, something remarkable happened. Even as systems changed, cultural memory remained. Respect for education survived. Family bonds endured beneath political pressure. The idea that China was more than a moment, more than a government, more than a generation stayed alive. People adapted again, as they always had. They learned new rules without forgetting old values. Over time, exhaustion replaced chaos. The cost of constant struggle became clear, and China did what it has done many times before. It adjusted, not by abandoning its path completely, but by correcting it. A new phase began, marked by pragmatism. Ideology softened. Daily life mattered again. Stability returned as a priority, but now it was paired with development. China opened itself carefully to the world, not with blind imitation, but with controlled engagement. Markets expanded, cities grew, millions were lifted out of poverty, speed returned, but this time it was directed. What made this phase unique was how continuity adapted to modernity. Ancient values of patience, long-term planning, and collective effort suddenly aligned with modernization. China did not rush for quick results alone. It thought in decades, in generations. This mindset, rooted deeply in its civilizational memory, became a powerful advantage. The state regained legitimacy not through tradition or revolution alone, but through performance. Order delivered results. Stability created growth. Growth reinforced trust. The old idea of the mandate of heaven returned in a new form, not through ritual, but through outcomes. If life improved, authority was justified. Culturally, China continued balancing old and new. Skyscrapers rose next to ancient temples. Technology entered homes shaped by centuries of habit. Young generations moved faster, spoke differently, and thought globally, yet remained connected to family and history. Modern Chinese identity did not reject continuity. It carried it forward quietly. At the same time, tension never disappeared. Rapid change created inequality, pressure, and anxiety. The pace of life accelerated. Expectations rose. Memories sometimes clashed with ambition. China was no longer struggling to survive. It was struggling to define success. And still, continuity remained the anchor. History was remembered selectively, but deeply. Tradition was no longer the rule book, but it remained the reference. China had learned that survival does not come from freezing the past or chasing the future blindly. It comes from managing both. This phase showed something essential about Chinese civilization. Continuity is not resistance to change. It is the ability to absorb change without losing coherence. Dynasties once played this role. Now, new structures did. The form changed. The instinct remained. As China re-entered the global stage with confidence, it did so carrying thousands of years of memory beneath modern power. It was no longer reacting to pressure alone. It was shaping direction. And this brings us to the final reflection. Because the most important question is no longer how China survived the past, but how this deep continuity shapes the China of today, and what it means for a world that is now moving faster than ever. Part 5. To understand China today, you must let go of the idea that history moves in straight lines. China does not see time as a series of beginnings and endings, but as a long river that bends, floods, narrows, and widens, yet never truly stops flowing. This way of seeing the world explains something essential. China's greatest strength has never been any single dynasty, ideology, or leader. It has been continuity, the ability to remain itself while becoming something new. Across thousands of years, China learned that collapse is not the end of civilization. It is a phase. Dynasties fell, systems failed, chaos erupted, and suffering followed. Yet each time, order returned. Not because history repeated mechanically, but because collective memory guided reconstruction. People remembered what worked, what failed, and what mattered most. This memory lived not only in books, but in habits, values, and expectations passed quietly from generation to generation. This is why modern China cannot be understood as a break from the past. It is a continuation shaped by new conditions. The language of emperors disappeared, but the logic of long-term thinking remained. The mandate of heaven no longer exists as belief, but its function survives. Authority is still judged by results, stability, and the ability to protect society from chaos. When life improves, legitimacy grows. When it fails, pressure builds. This instinct is ancient. China's relationship with power reflects this history. Power is not romanticized as freedom, nor rejected as oppression alone. It is seen as responsibility. Order is valued because disorder has been experienced deeply. Unity is prioritized because fragmentation once brought immense suffering. These values do not come from theory, they come from memory. Continuity also explains how China approaches the future. While many societies think in election cycles or short-term success, China tends to think in decades. Infrastructure, education, technology, and influence are planned with patience. This patience is not slowness. It is strategic endurance. It is the same patience that once governed rivers, harvests, and dynastic cycles, now applied to a modern world. Yet continuity is not comfort. It comes with tension. Rapid modernization has created pressure on identity, tradition, and individual life. Young generations move faster than ever before. Cities change yearly. Technology reshapes relationships. Expectations rise quickly. And beneath this speed, an old question returns in a new form. How do you grow without losing balance? China has faced this question many times. Each time, the answer was not found in extremes. Neither total rejection of the past nor blind preservation of it ever worked. Survival came from adjustment, from bending instead of breaking, from reform that respected structure. This is why Chinese continuity is not nostalgia. It is adaptability anchored in memory. To outsiders, China may appear contradictory, ancient yet modern, disciplined yet dynamic, closed yet global. But from within, these contradictions make sense. They are not conflicts to be solved, but balances to be managed. China does not seek to erase its past to move forward. It carries it silently, like a compass. And this has global meaning. In a world obsessed with speed, disruption, and constant reinvention, China offers a different lesson: that endurance matters, that institutions outlast individuals, that memory can be a resource, not a burden, that continuity does not mean refusing change, it means surviving it. China's story shows that civilizations do not disappear only when they are conquered. They disappear when they forget who they are. China never fully forgot. Even in moments of deepest collapse, identity remained alive in family, language, values, and collective memory. Today, China stands once again at the center of global attention, powerful, influential, debated, and watched. But its real story is not about dominance or competition. It is about time, about what it means to carry thousands of years into an uncertain future without losing coherence. China is not repeating its dynasties. It has moved beyond them. But the instinct that once sustained dynasties still guides it, the instinct to preserve order, to learn from collapse, and to rebuild patiently. And that is why China continues, not because it never fell, but because every time it fell, it remembered how to stand again. This is the story of dynasties. This is the story of continuity. And this story, like China itself, is still unfolding.